Battlefield 2042 reveal trailer created a major hype around itself. Liked and loved by many, it was shaping up to be the next big thing in the franchise, especially after Battlefield 5. Fans were promised for it's going to be the biggest Battlefield game ever. Dynamic weather, a very large map, and a massive 128-player all-out warfare. All these looked like as if Battlefield was finally back. But after all this, how did EA even manage to fail the game so badly? What actually happened in this game on release? So here are the 5 most crucial reasons that failed Battlefield 2042 and which made players to leave the game. Battlefield 2042 launch was so horrendous, that is, still remembered for its horrible design choices. So any multiplayer game, here specifically a multiplayer shooter game, will always be kept competitive, where there is a competitiveness among friends or with other players. But guess what? The Battlefield 2042 absolutely made sure that there is no competition amongst players in an online multiplayer shooter game. The scoreboard was missing from the game at launch. Why? And like, who decides to not add a scoreboard in a multiplayer game? Maybe this was done so players don't feel bad about their low score. Anyways, the scoreboard was one thing, next one is more questionable. There was no voice chat at launch. Yes, no voice chat for you. Can't trash talk with your squad. It was like they were trying to create peace and harmony in a competitive game. Other than these, the absence of server browser, lack of map voting, and no squad management directed this game directly into its grave. Plus, the remarkable, extraordinary, breathtaking class system that came with this game needs special slot in this list. Anyways, this was not just all the problems the game had at launch. In fact, the next point is also very crucial, which could definitely make or break a game. Any game at launch must work properly, because that will heavily affect the longevity of a game. And apart from missing features at launch, Battlefield 2042 absolutely did not disappoint in disappointing the fans. So after the massive hype, it fell on its face, as it was infested with bugs and glitches. Graphical glitches, pop-ins, performance issues, it had it all. And clearly, it was not launch ready. Constant crashes, server and performance issues made the game so bad that eventually players started abandoning the game. It could be somewhat better if these were missing from the game rather than a scoreboard. But, as usual, this alone cannot fail a game, as there were more things that ruined this into its grave. Battlefield games have always been known for its maps and weapons. Having countless maps and large amount of arsenal is very expected from this franchise. So, when Battlefield 2042 released, it had the least number of maps and weapons. Where the previous games used to launch with 9 to 10 maps and 50 to 80 weapons. Battlefield 2042 took an extra leap, and how much 2042 came with? 9 maps, 40 weapons. No, it only came with 7 maps and massive 22 weapons that revolutionized the franchise. Made it Game of the Year worthy material. Anyways, the reduced number of maps and weapons made it so repetitive. There was no variety, no point of grinding apart from few guns that were dominating, and thus it quickly became boring. Paying full price for a game that was half-baked and only was going to add more in long-term in the name of live service made it unworthy of its price. But what else could go wrong with this game? Well, of course, they chose to mess with the core mechanic of any Battlefield game. One of the core elements of Battlefield games has always been its class system, where each class had its own role during the match. The Assault class handled the front line, the Engineer class dealt with the vehicle, the Support class provided ammo and health, and Recon gave intel. All the classes played their specific role. But the Battlefield 2042 had different plans. It introduced a different type of class system and called them the Specialists. Each one came with their own gadgets, abilities, and a cringe dialogue, but they can access any weapon and equipment in the game. This on paper sounded like it will create player freedom and customization, but it did completely opposite, like who is going to give ammo and health or who is going to deal with a tank. Nobody had no clue, but this looks like a tiny problem next to a problem where you couldn't even identify who is who. Squad looked the same, enemy looked the same, everything looked the same. The sheer amount of frustration it caused just cannot be described, just so they could make Battlefield into another hero shooter. Map design is crucial for any multiplayer shooter, and Battlefield 2042 didn't do a very good job at it. In order to accommodate a massive 128-player lobby, DICE created a vast map, but eventually it backfired. Objectives were usually placed at an awkward yet at a far distance, which resulted in majority of the gameplay loop in running from one objective to another, unless someone snipes you. Big map meant nothing for the gameplay. There was no cover, objective placements were poorly made, which all resulted in repetitive and boring gameplay. Battlefield's signature destruction mechanic was significantly toned down. Buildings and environment did not react much to players' actions. Although the weather mechanic heavily marketed before launch, it did not add much to the gameplay and remained a gimmick with no purpose. Battlefield 2042 was among the most hyped games. Upon launch, it created so much frustration among its fanbase, who wanted to play and have fun with this game, but EA eventually rushed out an incomplete game with a full price tag, took decisions that ultimately affected the game sale and lost players' trust. Battlefield 2042 was somewhat got fixed in later updates, but it was already too late and players already moved on, and it could never make a comeback, as some problems were deeply rooted into the game design which couldn't be fixed.